In this video, we're going to talk about an incredibly important skill for using Excel effectively, and that is understanding how Excel treats absolute and relative cell referencing in terms of within a formula, how Excel treats a cell position value. That sounds like a mouthful. Let's talk about what that means. Let's say I have some data, and the data here just refers to the cell's position. So here's the value in this cell is B3 because this cell represents column B, row 3. And down the line, B4, B5 represents column B, row 5. And we go across to column C and column D. So each of these values here represents its position in the Excel spreadsheet. Now, let's say I wanted to recreate this table using a formula. So my goal is to put a single formula in this box here that I could then copy and paste 3 rows down and 3 columns to the right to recreate these values. It's not very difficult. All I have to do is click on the equal key to tell Excel to grab something or to input a formula. And my formula is simply whatever's in this value here. So if I do equals whatever's in this cell right here, which Excel reads as B3, and I hit enter, Excel is going to give me whatever is in that cell over there. Now, the way that Excel literally reads this here, the value in the formula referring to the cell's position, is the way it literally reads this is it looks at the row and column relative to the position of the output. And what that means is when Excel reads B3, Excel's not reading B3. Excel is reading whatever value is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns to the left, which just happens to be B, and whatever value is in the same row as my output. So it's taking this cell here that I have in my formula, and it's reading it relative to my output position. Okay. And the reason why this is important is if I were to copy and paste this formula down into this box right here, the way that Excel would do this was it literally says, okay, the formula was B3, and when I move down 1 row, I'm still going to grab whatever is 4 columns to the left, which happens to be B, but I'm also still going to grab whatever's in the same row as my formula, which in this case is 4. So if I were to copy, I'm going to do Control-C to copy and paste, what we can see is Excel has automatically updated the formula for us, right? We had put B3 into this box right here, and we copied and pasted it down. Excel said, well, if you want to move the formula down 1 row, then I'm going to update the formula cell position to grab whatever is down 1 row. So I'm going to move from B3 to B4, right? And if I were to copy and paste this formula over to the right one, Excel would say, I'm still going to grab whatever is in the same row, and I'm also still going to grab whatever is 4 columns to the left. But here, if I were to copy and paste this over to the right, well, in this case, 4 columns to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, would be whatever's in column C. And so we could see that it was able to give me column C, right? And the cool thing about this is that if I were to copy and paste for the entire table, I would be able to reproduce the entire table with one single formula because Excel is automatically updating this formula relative to its original position. And by moving down, Excel grabs whatever's down. By moving right, Excel grabs whatever's right. So this is the default way that Excel works. And most of the time, this is exactly what we want, but not always. Let's imagine a case instead where what we wanted to do was we wanted to paste a single formula. Oops, back up here. What we want to paste is a single formula in this cell here that we can then copy and paste the entire table. But this time we want our output to look like this. And what we could see is that as we move this formula over to the right, we want Excel to do what it normally does. And that is that relative cell referencing. We want Excel to update the formula cell position over to the right. But as we move down rows, we don't want Excel to move down rows. We always want Excel to grab whatever's in row 3. So let's see how we would do that. Well, first, we're going to start out with our original formula here, equals B3. That gives us our starter value. And again, we can see that if we just copy and paste, Excel updates both the column relative position, which is what we want, but it also updated the row relative position going down as we copied and pasted the formula down, which is what we don't want. And the way that we tell Excel, hey, I want you to move the column freely, but I want you to lock the row into place, is with dollar signs. So Excel, so a really important thing about using Excel is that we use dollar signs to tell Excel when we don't want our cell formulas to move relative to our position of our output. And in this case, we want to be very strategic with where we put the dollar sign. We want Excel to move the columns relative to our pasting. So again, when I paste over one column, we want Excel to update the formula to move over one column. So that is great. We want Excel to use its default relative cell referencing, but we want to lock the rows into place. So what I would do is I would put a dollar sign in front of the row value, right? Again, the way that Excel literally reads this formula here is, okay, I'm going to grab whatever is in the column 1, 2, 3, 4 columns to the left of my output, and I'm going to grab whatever is always in row 3. I'm always going to stay in row 3, no matter which row this formula is pasted in. So again, let's see what happens if I copy and paste this formula. Actually, before I do that, let me delete these values here so we can kind of guess what would happen, right? Let's guess what would happen if I were to copy and paste this formula in this cell right here, right? What we know is that the formula is going to grab whatever is 4 columns to the left, because this is relative, and we know it's going to stay in row 3. So if we were to copy and paste this cell in this formula right here, it would say, grab whatever value is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns to the left and in row 3. So it should return D3. Let's see what happens. And then we got D3. Again, if we were to copy and paste that value right here, it would return whatever is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns to the left, but stay in row 3 because we used that absolute cell referencing to lock that 3 into place. So it should return C3. So now we have a single formula. By using this dollar sign here, we have a single formula that we can copy and paste this one value here, and we could paste it to the entire table to reproduce our desired output. Okay, let's do another one though. What if instead of that as our output, what we wanted was this? So here we want a case where as we copy and paste the formula down rows, we want the formula to adjust relative. So we do want movement down the rows. But as we copy and paste across the columns, we want Excel to lock in the position of the column. We always wanted to grab from column B, right? So again, if we were to put in our original formula equals B3, this is telling Excel to move position relative in relation to both columns and rows. So it's literally saying grab whatever is in 4 columns to the left and whatever's in the same row, right? But in this case, we want to tell Excel to lock the column into place. And the way that we would do that is we would put our dollar sign in front of the column. So the way that Excel reads this is now it's going to say, wherever I paste this formula, Excel is going to say, grab whatever's in column B and whatever's in the same row as the formula, because this formula, this value cell position is in row 3, and my output is also in row 3. So it's saying grab the same row and grab whatever's in column B. So if I were to copy and paste that right here, the way that Excel would interpret this is stay in the same row, but grab whatever's in column B, which would be B4. Let's see if that happens. And likewise, if I were to copy and paste that right over here, it would say grab whatever's in the same row, right? Because we've got our row is moving relative, and the relative position of this to this is the same row. So grab whatever's in the same row and also grab whatever's in column 3. So this is going to return B3, same row, column B, right? And if I do this one more time, same row, column B is going to return B5. And so by putting this absolute cell referencing, by putting the dollar sign in front of the B, I'm able to create a single formula that I can copy and paste to my entire table and reproduce this output if it was my desirable output. And the last one we want to work on is what if our desired output looks like this? Basically, we want a single cell formula in a single cell that we could copy and paste to the entire table that's always going to return whatever value is in B3, right? So here, if I just did my formula equals B3, and I were to copy and paste this over, it would move the columns relative. So my columns shifted, and it would move the rows relative. My rows shifted as well. I don't want any movement at all. I want Excel to always give me what's in column B, and I want Excel to always give me what's in row 3. If I tell Excel to do that, then no matter where I copy and paste this formula, it's always going to give me this cell right here, B3, right? So let's give that a shot. Copy and paste it to everything, and no matter where I went in my pasting, it always gave me B3, right? Excel did not update the column position or the row position relative to my pasting because I told it not to with these dollar signs. Okay, let's talk about why this is important. Let's talk about how it's really important to use these in certain contexts. So let's imagine we have a table like this, and the table gives us for each month, it gives us a price of a product and how many products were sold by 2 different employees. And what we want to calculate is we want to calculate Jim's revenue, and revenue is just price times sales. And we want to calculate Lauren's revenue, okay? And we wanted to be able to create a formula for Jim that we could easily copy and paste to Lauren and to February that's going to calculate the correct revenue figures, right? So the way I can do this for Jim is I can do equals, and I could say price times sales. And that gave me the correct revenue for Jim in the month of January. Now, if I were to just copy and paste this formula to my table here, and we could imagine a case where we have many more months and many more employees, right? If I were to just copy and paste this formula for Jim, what I see is that when I look at Jim's revenue for February, it performed the correct calculation. It took price for February and Jim's sales for February. So when I copied and pasted that formula down the rows, Excel did exactly what I wanted it to do. But when I copied and pasted it across the columns, what I could see is for Lauren's revenue, rather than taking price times Lauren's sale, Excel moved everything with relative cell referencing, which is the default. And what ended up happening was Excel is now multiplying Jim's sales times Lauren's sales, which is not Lauren's revenue, right? So what I need to tell Excel is when I'm applying this formula and when I'm moving it across my table, right, or down the rows, what I want Excel to do is for this value right here, which is B4, for this value right here, if I move down, if I copy and paste this down to a different row, I want Excel to move the formula down to a different row, right? But as I copy and paste this B4 value over to the right for Lauren, I don't want Excel to move this blue box over here. I want it to keep this blue box in the B column, right? So I need to tell Excel to lock this cell here in the B column, right? And now for this cell here, C4, as I move this formula over to Lauren, I want this C4 to shift to D4. So I do want relative cell positioning for the C column, right? And for the row position, if I were to paste this formula down a row, I would want this red box to move down. So everything looks good here. What I've done is I've made sure that the red box moves relative and the blue box moves down but stays in the price column. So now let's look at what happens when I copy and paste this formula. Okay, so I pasted the formula here and it automatically updated to the right calculation for Jim's revenue. And when I pasted the formula here, it automatically updated the calculations for Lauren's revenue. It moved the red box over, but it kept the blue box in the same column, right? And when I did the calculation here, it automatically moved the red box over and down, which is what I wanted, right? Because it moved over 1 and down 1. So from Jim's sales to Lauren sales. And for the price, the blue box, it shifted down a row, but stayed in the same column because I locked the column into place, right? So now by locking that column into place, I was able to correctly use this formula to calculate all of my revenues. Let's do one more to again show why this is really important. So let's imagine our table instead looked like this. Write this over here. Look like this. So now in this case, we have our price in a single cell because the price stayed the same throughout the entire time series, right? And now we have sales for Jim and sales for Lauren across different months. And again, we want to calculate Jim's revenue and Lauren's revenue. So the way we calculate Jim's revenue is it's going to be Jim's sales times the price. Okay. And when we hit enter on this, it gives us the correct value for Jim's revenue, which is 25. If I were to copy and paste this to my table, though, I would get a bunch of wrong answers. So my formula here was not strong enough and efficient enough to be able to copy and paste to the different cells. Now, I could individually recreate these formulas. So I could say for this one here, it's going to be this times this. And then for this one here, it's going to equal this. This times this. I could do that. And maybe if I only had to do 4 calculations, this would not take me too long. But again, if I had hundreds or thousands of employees and I had, multiple months or over the course of many years, this would be a major problem. So I would have to be very efficient. So if I look at what this is doing a red box times a blue box. Let's first focus on the blue box, whatever's in B11, right? As I move this formula from this box here to this cell here, which would calculate Jim's revenue for February, I want the blue box to move down. So I want relative positioning in terms of the row value of the blue box. And as I move this formula over to the right from Jim to Lauren, I want the blue box to shift over to the right from Jim to Lauren. So I want the column to be relative as well. In other words, I want to leave the default relative cell referencing for both row and column for the blue box. But with the red box, I always want it to stay in this position. I don't want this, if I copy and paste the formula down for Jim's February revenue, I don't want this red box to move down. So I've got to lock that row into place for the red box by putting a $ in front of the row. And likewise, when I copy and paste this formula from Jim to Lauren, I don't want the red box to move over to the right. I want the red box to stay in the same column. So I need to lock the column in as well. So this is the formula that I'm going to want to use now, that if I copy and paste it to my entire table, I get the correct values. In every case, the blue box moved relative to the positioning of my pasting, but the red box stayed in the same position. The point is, it's really important for us to understand the use of the $ and locking values in, which we call absolute cell referencing. And we also have to understand the implications of Excel's treatment of no $ in terms of relative cell referencing.